Hi everyone, and welcome to Truth Over News. During today's show, we want to explore a very real and we think very important question. Did Joe Biden's actions in Ukraine lead to the creation of the Russiagate lie? We're beginning to strongly suspect that this may be so. It seems obvious that once Biden had sorted out the prosecutor situation in Ukraine, he needed to make sure his actions stayed hidden. All the more so because it seems impossible to believe that Obama didn't have at least a general idea of what his vice president was up to in Ukraine, along with China and Romania. Indeed, it seems likely to us that the cover-up was really more about protecting Obama than protecting Biden. And if that's true, the entire DC complex couldn't afford to have Trump poking around in Ukraine as the new president, which explains the sudden and intensified targeting of the Trump campaign in the late spring of 2016. It also explains the explosion of attacks on Trump once he became president, in part because they never really expected that he would win. Hillary was supposed to be the patch for Biden's Ukraine problem, but a backup plan was developed. Remember Peter Strzok talking to Lisa Page about the insurance policy in August of 2016? I want to believe the path he threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. In our opinion, they were likely talking about the creation of the Intelligence Community Assessment, or ICA, an insurance policy that would be used in the unlikely event that Trump won. The assessment, which was officially commissioned by Obama after the 2016 election, was magically completed by early January 2017. The actions by Obama, Brennan, the intelligence community, and the rest of the DC establishment to stain Trump's presidency with claims of Russian collusion were remarkably successful. If you remember, in 2017, it seemed far from certain that Trump's presidency would survive. Robert Mueller was brought in for good measure to ensure that even if Trump did survive, his administration would be hobbled by an ongoing investigation. But despite their efforts, Trump slowly regained his footing until he started poking around in Ukraine. And it was here that Democrats lost their collective minds. If Trump was allowed to continue, he would have discovered all that Biden was doing in Ukraine, which explains the sudden ferocity of efforts by Democrats to impeach Trump. They not only had to make Trump stand down, they had to make the topic of Ukraine toxic, untouchable, a position which defies any common sense, given Ukraine's reputation as the single most corrupt nation in Europe. To make this work, Democrats also had to ensure that Hunter's laptop was effectively placed into quarantine, hidden from public view. July 25, 2019, marked the date of President Trump's famous phone call with Ukraine's new president, Volodymyr Zelensky. It was during this call that Trump told Zelensky that he would like him to speak with Giuliani and Attorney General Bill Barr, saying, "I'll ask him to call you along with the Attorney General. Rudy very much knows what's happening and he's a very capable guy." It was this phone call that led directly to the December 2019 impeachment of Trump. In a coincidence that is certainly not a coincidence, July 2019 is the exact same time that the FBI was made aware of Hunter's laptop. And the FBI's cover-up of Hunter's laptop directly impacted the impeachment hearings of President Trump. Imagine the differing outcome if evidence from Hunter's laptop could have been introduced during Trump's impeachment hearings. It would have been devastating to Biden. Instead, Trump was impeached by the Democrat-controlled House on December 18, 2019. One of the primary charges leveled by the left was that Trump corruptly solicited the government of Ukraine to publicly announce investigations into Joe Biden in order to create false and damaging narratives. The media was more than happy to broadcast the DNC's message that Trump had engaged in corruption during his communications with Ukraine's new president. But an examination of the actual phone transcript shows a different story. Trump told Zelensky that there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution of Burisma owner Nikolai Zlochevsky, and a lot of people want to find out about that, so whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Trump's claims were factually correct. In a sane world, one would expect that a politician's actions and the overlapping business activities of his son in a country like Ukraine would be cause for alarm and subject to immediate oversight and inquiry. But unfortunately, it does make a twisted sense when one steps back and views Ukraine as one giant laundry machine for all of DC. On Monday, Hunter's old business partner, Devon Archer, testified that Joe Biden had been at dinners, meetings, and on conference calls with foreign business associates of Hunter at least 20 different times. This incredible admission cuts to the heart of Joe Biden's corruption. In some respects, it doesn't even matter what was discussed. Bringing the Vice President of the United States into a call with your corrupt business partners is the very definition of influence peddling. Hunter, Joe, and all their business partners knew perfectly well what was implied by having his father on the phone call. The damaging testimony from Archer apparently left Dems a bit flustered.
That it was part of the daily conversations that Hunter Biden had with his father, and it was and sounded like most of the time now President Biden didn't even know who the people he was at dinner. He was just asked to say hello, and he would, talk about the way he described it several times. They asked over and over and over. He described what the weather was.
But he said specifically that he's never talked to them. Doesn't this contradict him?
I don't know what his comment is, and if we're gonna, well, I don't think that's what he said.
This new revelation from Archer marked a major shift in Democrat talking points and the public narrative. First, it was Joe never talked to Hunter about his business. Then it shifted to Joe never talked to Hunter's business partners. Now, Joe talked extensively with them all, but it was just about the weather. It's also worth pointing out that Democrat Representative Goldman has more reason than most to be nervous. Before he leveraged his way into Congress, he was the counsel for House Democrats during Trump's first impeachment, all of which goes a long way to explaining Goldman's obvious panic and his ongoing lies. He had to know everything about Biden's actions in Ukraine the entire time. Goldman kept going. The following day, he made the incredible claim that Burisma didn't want Shokin fired, and that Biden's actions to fire Shokin therefore ran counter to Burisma's interests.
The only evidence is that that Joe Biden's official actions ran counter to Hunter Biden's interests, because this witness said that Burisma believed they had the corrupt prosecutor general, and I quote what the witness said, under control, and they did not want him to be fired because that might mean that Burisma and their president would get investigated, and yet that's exactly what Joe Biden advocated.
Goldman almost certainly is intentionally conflating the earlier corrupt Ukrainian prosecutor, Vitaly Yarema, whom Burisma bribed to end a previous investigation, with Viktor Shokin, whom they definitely wanted gone. But leaving that matter aside, why did Burisma's CFO Vadim Pozharsky send Hunter that famous email on November 2nd, 2016, asking for help from top U.S. officials and demanding deliverables to close down any cases against Zlochevsky if Burisma had the prosecutor under control? As we know, Hunter took that email very seriously. That same day, Hunter reached out to Amos Hochstein, Obama's special envoy and coordinator of international energy affairs. They met 4 days later and discussed Burisma and Zlochevsky. On November 22nd, less than 3 weeks after Pozharsky's email, Joe Biden suddenly demanded that Shokin be fired. If Goldman is this desperate, I would argue that they are actually pretty worried. All of these incredible antics from Democrats and the intelligence community bring us back to our original question. Did Biden's illegal activities in Ukraine need to be masked to protect not only Biden, but also Obama?